Welcome to a very special episode of Changing the Channel. Today, I am not joined by anyone. I am doing my first solo podcast, and this is really to recap this last 10 months of doing the podcast, of sharing really amazing conversations with people that I never would have expected or could have imagined that I would have connected with. So I just want to take a couple moments to reflect on some of the lessons that I learned doing this podcast. And for those who have been listening and paying attention, thank you. It means the world to me to have people who are listening, some of you to every single episode. Even if you're just popping in and out, it still is amazing that I'm able to share what I'm going through, the lessons, the experiences that I'm experiencing, and have conversations with people that are expanding my awareness and my understanding of how this world works. And I get to share that with everybody else. And it brings me a lot of joy. Not that I'm doing this for anyone else except for myself, but the fact that it is touching other people, that it is maybe creating a little bit of a change in somebody else's perspective. That just really means a lot to me. So thank you all to those who are listening. And if you have been paying attention, I've dropped a few hints, but I am going to be taking this summer off. So the summer of 2024, I'm going to just be putting out a few episodes, maybe every other week or so. And it's just going to be a rebroadcast of some of my favorite episodes that I've done over the last 63 or so podcasts that I've put out. And I still have a couple more podcasts in the bank for when I do start back up again. And I'll be doing some more recording probably in the fall and into the winter, which will be very exciting. I'm very excited to have those conversations and to kind of see where this podcast goes, because I got into it thinking it would be some kind of experience. It would have a certain message. And the more that I got into it, the more that I realized it's going to continue to evolve as my understanding evolves, as my lived experiences evolve, as my career evolves. The podcast will evolve along with that. So I'm glad you're here for the ride. And like I said, this is kind of a recap of everything I've learned, everything I've experienced, and then maybe a little bit of a teaser for what we have into the future, what the podcast might be evolving into. So one of the biggest lessons and probably the biggest takeaway from this experience was the thing that scares you the most is often the path worth taking. So when I first got into this, I'd had a bunch of conversations. I always enjoyed talking on a deeper level with other people, but it was a one-on-one. Maybe there were two or three people in the room, but it was never, I didn't put it out into the world. It wasn't, I had no expectations of ever putting any of that information out into the world. And when my coach suggested, hey, maybe a podcast is what you might want to think about. You have some of the skills that are required to be hosting a podcast, to be having these conversations, being able to distill information down into a digestible bit of conversation is definitely helpful. To be able to take these complex ideas and maybe ideas that some people are just completely unaware of or have never heard of before, and to be able to make them relatable is kind of one of the skills that I seem to be able to have. And I actually enjoy. It's not just a skill that I have, but it's something that I truly enjoy doing. So when my coach, said, hey, let's try a podcast, I was like, well, first of all, who am I going to talk to? Where am I going to find people? Where am I going to record it? How am I going to record it? Like, what are all the steps to it? And I really got in my own way from just diving in and saying, let's make this podcast. And that was kind of the first lesson. It was like, this is a scary thing. I don't think I can do it. I don't know why you want me to do it, but okay, I'm going to take the steps to do it. So I think the first time I decided I was going to do a podcast was probably the first week of August in 2023. Kind of did some research, looked at how to record a podcast, probably spent a good 8 to 10 hours that week just really researching what is a podcast, how do you build a podcast, how do you create a podcast, how do you record a podcast, how do you edit a podcast, and just searching and finding those all those different tools that I needed to learn so that I could actually put out a functioning podcast. So through that week, I understood how to do it. Now the next step was, where do I find guests? And that was always kind of the scariest part of this. It's like, well, who would want to come on the show and talk to me? And originally I reached out to people that I knew, friends, family members. That was the first step. And it felt very uncomfortable to reach out to them. Because I don't think they were aware that I had a podcast, and they're like, well, what is this thing, and how are we going to do it, and why have you even asked me? Like, what am I supposed to share? So that was a good lesson to learn. Then I started reaching out. I found some groups. I found some tools that allowed you to connect with other people, and all of a sudden I was having conversations with people that were, at the time for me, felt like leaps and bounds ahead of where I was at. These were, professionals who had been doing this for 3, 4, 5 years. Some people that I had on the show had a podcast for almost 10 years. They'd put out 500, 600, 800 episodes. And I'm like, holy cow, like what? Why are they coming on my show? I honestly couldn't believe it. And the more I started reaching out to people, the more I realized people want to have these conversations. They want to come on. They want to share what they have and their knowledge and their wisdom and their journey. And it just all started to snowball. It started to grow. And I started to basically rewire my brain to think and to know that I can do this, that this is a possibility for me. And that's when it stopped being scary and started being fun. So again, that first lesson, the thing that scares you the most is often the path worth taking. It just goes to show, it might be scary. It might be frustrating at times because you're like, I don't know what the answers are, but just keep trusting, keep knowing that you're doing this because it's in your path. The second lesson, I think, is when you put yourself out there, that there's doors that you never could have imagined that will just start to open. So the more that you put yourself out there, the more that you're going to start to see these doors opening for you, these synchronistic interactions that you have with people, these opportunities for you, whether that's in your career or in your personal life or in your love life, they just start to kind of come out of the woodworks. They start to show up in your life. And that's because you're putting yourself out there. You're putting out your vibration into the world. And the more that you can put that vibration out into the world, the more you're going to begin to attract people that resonate with that vibration. So if you just keep that vibration hidden, if you never put it out into the world, if you never share your ideas, you never share your perspective, you never share even the thoughts, maybe they might not be 100% fleshed out, but you putting them out into the world is going to create opportunities for people to be a mirror for those ideas so that you can see, oh, well, actually, maybe it doesn't exactly go this way, but I was on the pathway and this person showed me that maybe there's a different perspective to be looking at it through. So that was another very unique lesson for me, was that the more that I put myself out there, the more that I had these conversations, the more that I allowed myself to share my deepest thoughts, my deepest ideas, the things that I'd not shared with anyone else, the more that it seemed to just unlock things both inside me on my internal world and externally in the external world. People started showing up, opportunities started showing up, just kind of really coming into my own. So that was a really cool lesson to learn for me on a personal level, and then also hopefully be able to share that with others. The next one, and this was an interesting experience. So I recorded the intro to the show before, actually it was after I'd recorded my first episode, but it was really before I had any clue what I was doing, what the show was going to be about, what the purpose of the show was going to be about. And I was just kind of messing around, and all of a sudden these words came. I wrote them down and then I spoke them, and I honestly didn't fully understand what I was talking about. This global shift in consciousness, the awareness of our higher senses, healing ourselves so that we can become our greatest version. All of those things meant something different at the start of the show, and now 8-10 months later mean a completely different thing. And that has been fascinating to see. So there is, and this is again my hypothesis and kind of how I'm operating in the world right now. This is my current worldview. It is early June of 2024. And basically, there's a shift in the consciousness of the planet. And when I say consciousness, I mean the awareness of the abilities of humans. So it appears that there's a larger and larger percentage of people who are able to access their sixth sense, their creativity, their intuition, their connection to, whether you call it the universe or God or this prevailing field of infinite potentiality, whatever word you use for accessing the state that allows you to see things that are coming, to know that there is something that is calling you out to be the best version of yourself, or there's something that is really that's getting you to step out of where you are right now and to move and evolve as a being, as a human, as a consciousness. And a lot of humans are really coming into their ability to access what has been typically called their spiritual abilities or their sixth sense. And what it seems like is not only are more humans being able to access that, but also the science behind that is starting to come along, to develop, to really start to understand what that is. That the human mind is just tuning into different frequencies all the time. And what we call thoughts are just essentially programs that are zooming in and out of our awareness. They're just these different programs, and as we change our frequency that we're operating at, we get to change the channel that we're tuned into. We get to change the frequency that we're tuned into at that very moment. And what I've been helping people do is to really detach their physiological response to those thoughts from the thoughts. So instead of having a physiological reaction to a thought and believing that that thought is actually happening to you, because again, the mind can't tell the difference between something that happens to you and a thought that you have. It's the same physiological response. So as you develop your ability to separate the thought from the physiological response, what starts to happen is you realize, oh wait, I actually have control over which thoughts that I believe, over what thoughts that I think are my own or think who I am, and all these other thoughts that you have. So this awareness, this shift in consciousness, instead of believing that the access to this higher power, to this higher knowledge, to this higher wisdom is just happens by chance. There's prophets that are chosen by God who get to experience access to this higher level of information, is starting to kind of fall away. And it really starts to become, this is a practice that everybody can do. Again, it's a muscle. It's a learned pattern of response. So you have to actually practice doing this, and meditation, mindfulness, just any practice, even exercise, running, anything that gets you out of your everyday thought patterns and gets you to see from a different perspective. So essentially shifting your brain pattern out of the beta, which is like our standard waking frequency that the nervous system in the brain is typically in, and shifting that maybe into theta, which is going to be your receptive. So that's 4 to 8 hertz. That's going to be your receptive frequency. You're going to start listening to the guidance of this universal intelligence. Again, whatever framework that you have for what that universal intelligence is, whether it's a field, a person, a thing, a God, the universe, whatever that understanding is, it's all the same thing. So that's kind of accessing that higher power, getting into the theta brainwave state. And then there's getting into like the gamma brainwave state. So that is going to be drawing in the experiences and being able to, as you send your frequency out, being open to seeing how it's coming back instead of ignoring all the synchronicities that are happening because you're so focused on what's going to happen tomorrow and worried about the future or worried about the past or focused on the past and keep reliving the past over and over again. You're missing the experiences. You're missing the opportunities that are showing up to you because you are changing your frequency, because you're becoming a different version of yourself. So balancing those two, balancing the receptive and the active meditation, or the receptive and the active frequencies that you're experiencing, and then also coming back to beta. You still need to be in the beta brainwave state, which is just like your average conscious awareness, your awakening, your awake level of consciousness, and finding a good balance between all three has been a key for me, and has been how I've been able to shift what I thought was possible, what I believed was possible, and how I was showing up in the world every single day. And if you want to learn a little bit more about that, I'll have a link in the bottom. You can set up a discovery call with me, and we can talk about how to really get you in this flow of theta, beta, gamma. How do you get into the flow of being able to access those states whenever you need to? And again, getting into the theta brainwave state and staying in that state all day has its trade-offs. You aren't functioning in the real world as well as most other humans are. And yeah, are things working out for you? Are you following your path? Absolutely. But unless you have a certain level of security, a certain level of help along the way, people that are helping guide you, helping you get to your appointments, these things, you can get lost in that theta state. You can get lost in the ever-present intelligence of the universe. And you have to understand that you need to bring that ever-intelligent ideas. Somehow you have to make them manifest into this reality. And that's, again, what the gammas are for. That's what the gamma brainwave states are for. It's taking this guidance, taking the guidance of the universe or God or this field of potential, your soul, whatever you believe that to be, and bringing that into this everyday timeline existence. And that's, using your creative abilities to actually make a difference in this 3D reality. And that's what we're all doing. And some humans have figured out how to do that really well. And they maybe have detached. They figured out how to bring their ideas into the world, but maybe they're not tuned into what their highest ideas are. And they're evolving towards them. But during that time, maybe they're bringing in things that aren't for the benefit of all humans. They're for the benefit of a small group of humans. And this is kind of the lesson I think that we're learning in the collective, is that if we're going to take on this responsibility, if we're going to be aware that we are the creators of our own reality, can we stay in tune with that guiding voice that sees what is coming into the future and knows this is what we're going to need in the future. Maybe that's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 decades from now, 100 generations from now. Again, this infinite field of potentiality doesn't experience time in a linear way. It knows and sees all of the time, all of these things. And again, I'm using terms. I'm using pronouns for this thing, and that's really not what it is. It just is every possible potential that could ever happen, that already has happened or will happen or could happen. And that is what I'm talking about. And a lot of humans call that God. A lot of humans call that the universe. A lot of humans call that your spiritual essence or angels, or so many different names for what this field is, this field of potentiality. And it, for humans, it makes sense. We love to create stories about things that we don't fully understand, that help us understand what they are. And hopefully most people are starting to realize that these stories, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, the I Ching, like all of these stories are just allegories that are explaining this infinite field of potentiality, this limitless ability to access the future, the past, to see what is coming, to know what is coming. They're all just stories to describe what is happening. And even mine is a story, this infinite field of potentiality. I mean, that's what it feels like to me. But again, that's just a story that I've made up in my head so that I can kind of understand something that is not necessarily able to be understood on a fully conscious level from the perspective of the human. And as we evolve and we become aware of, our 3D level, and then 4D level, and then 5D level, 6D level, and all of that stuff, our ability to understand what this is changes, but there's still the limitation of being able to put it into communicative words that convey an understanding that we have, but that those words mean different things for other people. And this is where, as more and more humans and we start to infiltrate the morphogenetic field, the field that we all have access to, whether it's on a conscious, subconscious, or unconscious level, as we continue to pump that field with this ability to access our higher powers, our sixth senses, then it becomes easier for more and more humans to do that. And this is part of that evolution. And this is what the species is going through, at least from my perspective, that more of us are accessing our higher senses, and we're bringing them into our everyday life. And again, this isn't a new phenomenon. This has been happening for thousands of years. It's just a higher percentage of humans are being able to do that. And that's what happens. This is how that shifting consciousness happens. There's a tipping point in the morphogenetic field where all of a sudden almost everyone has access. Once we hit, whether it's 1%, the square root of 1%, 10%, whatever that number is, there is a tipping point where all of a sudden everyone will have access to their ability to tune into these different fields, to tune into these frequencies, to see into the future, see into the past, to know and understand a little bit better who they truly are, what this human experience is all about, especially during this time, during this shift in consciousness, this heightening of awareness. And it's really cool. It's really cool to be on the planet at this time. So I am very thankful. I'm thankful for everybody who is joining me on this journey. And let me know. I would love to hear what you think about this solo podcast. This was just, I had, a couple bullet points picked out. I wanted to come on. I wanted to kind of share where I was going, what's happening, and then give you a little taste of what the future of this podcast might look like. So again, really talking about the shift of the consciousness of the planet. What does that mean for other humans as they start to experience this? And what does that mean for the humans that have been experiencing this and have gotten used to, and maybe have the idea that they are special, would be probably the word, that they're one of the chosen ones, that they're a special one. And how does their experience shift as they start to realize that, oh, actually more and more people are going to have access to it? That's the whole point. When a species starts an evolution in their consciousness, in their abilities, or just a physical evolution, as they start to evolve, there's 1 or 2 or 10 that have that ability, and then they share that with others. It goes into the morphogenetic field, and then more and more of the species is able to access that ability. So what happens when some of these people who, gained access to this ability earlier on in their life or were born with it, now are coming to grips with, oh, actually, this is what everybody's going to experience. And can we guide them? Can we move them towards and have them learn from the lessons that we were able to learn? And I had this conversation several times, and I'm sure I'll put 1 or 2 of those episodes, but I had people on that had their, what's called their spiritual awakening, or an awakening to their ability to access their 6th senses, back in the 90s, in the 80s. I haven't talked to anybody, I don't think, that experienced this in the 70s or 60s. But they're out there. They had, there was this awareness, and they were able to bring that awareness into the world. Some of them created some of the biggest businesses that exist today, or that have ever existed in the planet. And again, how can we stay and remain connected with that infinite field of information? Because as you evolve as a human, so too does your abilities and your mission, your calling in life. So will you get hung up on that one single specific calling, or will your calling continue to evolve and move and shift and change? And can you let go of all the things that you thought you were here to do, especially when, there's this shift in your understanding, another shift, a shift to a higher level that you might be afraid of. Again, that's kind of this stepping into the path that scares you the most. It's like, can you let go of who you were and become who you're meant to be? And again, this is an infinite game. There is no end to it. You don't get to a point and say, all right, I did it, I won, I'm the best at being a human. This game that we're playing is infinite. There is no end. Even when we get to the end of the human experience, there's billions of other experiences in the universe. It's mathematically impossible for the human existence to be the only existence, the only conscious existence. And as long as we develop our intuitive abilities along with our ability to create in the world, and we're creating with connection to our intuition, with connection to the infinite field of intelligence and potentiality, the human species will continue to evolve and evolve and evolve. And who knows where that leads us? Who knows what that takes us to? Obviously, interplanetary travel is the next step, and we're very, very, very well on our way with that. So, what happens after that? What's the next step? Where does our technology go, especially as we continue to increase the rate at which the technology is moving forward? It's going from, one technological advance in a generation to multiple technological advances all at the same time, all in a 10-year period, in a decade of time. So multiple technological advances within one human lifetime. And that's incredible to see. It's so exciting and scary. And again, for the path of humanity, this is which pathway is drawing us towards it. Is it the one that's scary and we don't know what happens on the other side? And is that the one that we want to be working towards? Or do we want to stay where we are, not go down those paths, stay comfortable in what we know and we understand? And that's a question that each one of us get to ask ourselves and then answer. You answer it with the actions that you're taking in your life. Are you taking the scary steps? Are you moving towards the path that you don't know what the outcome is? Or are you staying comfortable? And again, there's no wrong answer. This is an infinite game. You get to do this over and over and over again. But for those that are resonating with this call, for those that are resonating with the words that I'm speaking, please reach out to me. I would love to have the conversation. I'm looking for guests. I'm looking for people that want to come on the show. And I'm also looking for clients that want to take themselves from knowing that they have a calling, knowing that they have this higher power, and being able to actually bring it into the world. Or knowing that they have the ability to bring stuff into the world, but they don't know what they need to bring into the world. Those are the two clients that I work with. And I would love to have a conversation with you and see where that leads and kind of go from there. So I just want to send another thank you to everybody. Again, I'll be putting new episodes out sometime later in the fall, maybe in the winter. I'll be recording episodes coming up in the fall and the winter. And for the summer and early fall, I'm just going to be doing kind of a greatest hits. I'm going to put out some of my favorite episodes. And if you missed a couple of these episodes, I highly recommend listening to them because there's a reason that they're one of my favorite. They're great conversations. We got into a really deep flow state. We got into some topics that push the boundaries of my understanding and the guest's understanding. And that's where the creative aspect comes when you go into that field of unknown and start to really allow things to flow through you, allow this information to flow through you. So again, I hope everybody has a wonderful summer. Enjoy it, make the most of it, create what you're here to create, build what you're here to build, and do it with love, do it with compassion. So I hope you all have a great one. Take care. Love y'all. And keep listening to this journey that I'm on.